Happy birthday, Mr. Rogers.
Happy birthday, Mr. Rogers.
Happy birthday, Mr. Rogers.
Happy birthday,
Mr. Rogers. Hi, we're the Cowsills.
And happy birthday, Mr.
Happy
Rogers.
birthday, Mr. Rogers.
Happy
Mr. Rogers. Happy birthday to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Bergeron. As many of you know, I've spent a lot of time around kids, maybe because I'm just a big kid at heart. Well, today, we want to celebrate someone who had a really big heart for children. It's safe to say there's never been anyone quite like Fred Rogers. And after 50 years on television, people are rediscovering his legacy of wisdom and kindness. So we thought it would be fun to reach out to the fans of Fred Rogers and let them share their thoughts and memories about this gentleman known as America's favorite neighbor.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, me and my brother, we were watching Mr. Rogers. My mom was big on educational television. If we were gonna watch TV, we were gonna learn something. And so, yeah, I grew up on a lot of Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers was always on, and I always remember coming in, him always singing It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, and I was always super excited. But the one thing I would always focus on is the sweater he was wearing, because, well, red's always been my favorite color. And I would always get upset when he didn't put on the red sweater, because I would always want him to do it.
And I was cuddled up with my two toddlers on the couch, and the phone rings, and it was my girlfriend Laura, and James Thomas answered, his big brother. And she said, James Thomas, how's your mommy? Where is she? And he said, oh, she's on the couch watching Mr. Rogers. And I was.
You know, my first recollection of Mr. Rogers is this feeling that I had of this man that was drawing me in, and I couldn't quite figure out why. He was a very intriguing character that for some reason was able to build a relationship with me through the screen.
He comes in and then he's taking off the world of the outside and putting on the world of the inside, and it's that domesticity that was really important to him, and I think to a lot of people who were watching his program.
My first recollection would be at my grandma Go King's house. She was our neighbor across the street, and she babysat me from the time I was 6 weeks old all the way up until I went to school and past that in the summer times. And I would watch Mr. Rogers at her house. And to me, she was a female Mr. Rogers. So I had it coming from all angles, but I can vividly remember sitting, I had a little wooden table and a little tiny lawn chair that I would sit in the living room and watch Mr. Rogers.
Well, actually, the first programs I remember watching was his Fun and Games Week, where he went to visit a soccer field, and that was on a videotape at my grandma's place. I used to watch it over and over.
I'm thinking of it now. I'm watching my son, a little fella, probably 2, sitting on the floor, his little legs spread out, and his little face looking up at the TV, just with his mouth open, just mesmerized by Fred Rogers' show.
Fred Rogers was so much more than just a television show host. There was such a deeper level to his message, a deeper level to him as a person, that he wasn't just Mr. Rogers that you see on TV, that was a real life person with a much deeper level to him himself.
It's hard to even remember a time without Mr. Rogers. I got to be one of those, I guess, the first kids that got to see him, because I'm 53. And I just remember him just as everyday part of my childhood, really. So I can't remember like a time without him.
Just the way he would talk about certain subjects that children wouldn't believe that you'd be able to do.
He was a wonderful person to talk to because he was genuinely interested in whoever he was talking to.
Fred was the best listener I ever met in my life. I mean, I would go in and sit down next to him. He'd always be sitting on his couch in his office, and he had a chair right beside it. I'd go in and sit there, and I would just talk to him for 5 or 10 minutes, and I'd feel like I was cured. Spending 10 minutes with Mr. Rogers, he rarely said anything.
So I know I watched Mr. Rogers because of my girls, but pretty soon I just felt he was speaking to me. And, his messages just went into my heart, so I'm a fan.
My name is David Newell, but you may know me better as Mr. McFeely, the speedy delivery man from Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Now, today, I'm taking time out for my speedy deliveries to wish Mr. Rogers a very happy birthday. Happy birthday, Fred, and speedy delivery to you.
Happy birthday, Mr. Rogers. We miss you. You were legendary, and you truly changed the world.
I'm very lucky. I actually got to meet Fred Rogers, and I can tell you this, he was the same quiet and caring man off screen as he was on screen. But you probably knew that. So come on, we want to hear your stories and memories about Mr. Rogers.
Not a rumor, because it was a true story, that someone stole his car from in front of his house, and Fred came out and the car was gone. And then he came back about 8 hours later and the car was back. And there was a note on the dashboard, because the fact that Fred Rogers' car had been stolen, I think it was not 8 hours later, but a couple of days later. The fact that Fred Rogers' car had been stolen had been in the news. And the people who stole it heard the news, and they left a note on the dash saying, "We're so sorry, we didn't know it was your car, we never would have stolen it."
I remember sitting in college. I was in the library at the college. It was at nighttime, and I pulled up the PBS website, and there was a write a letter to Mr. Rogers, and I thought, well, obviously it's not going to go to Mr. Rogers, but I'm going to at least let somebody know what it meant to me. So I sent an email, and within 12 hours, I got a response. And still to this day, I tend to choke up when I read it. It's just, it was amazing. He said, "Thank you for your beautiful email message. I'm really grateful for the warm ways you wrote about what our program has meant to you. There are many joys in our work, but it's especially satisfying to hear from friends like you who grew up with our neighborhood and who continue to have such good feelings about our television visits. It meant a great deal to me to know that you feel our program helped you learn some things that are important for your life today as a young adult. You might like to know, we've long believed that the children who benefit the most from our neighborhood are the ones who have already experienced the deep investment of love from their own families, and so they are able to understand what we offer. I hope you can appreciate all the strengths from yourself and from your family that you brought to our program that helped you hear the positive messages and use them in such healthy ways in your own life. I'm proud to know you, Tia, and I'm honored that you think our neighborhood has helped you and others in such meaningful ways. Best wishes from all of us here, and a warm ugga-mugga from Daniel Stripe the Tiger to you. Sincerely, Fred Rogers."
When I graduated from my undergrad degree back in, I believe, 2000, might have been 99, I had an extra invitation to the graduation ceremony, and rather than just chuck it in the trash, I thought, well, I'll send it to somebody. And I decided to send it to Mr. Rogers for whatever reason. And so I wrote a note on the inside that talked about, thanking him for all of the messages that he had shared with young people throughout the years, and just the positive message that was behind that. And I sent it off to the studio, thinking nothing of it. And within 2 or 3 days, had a letter back in the mail from Fred Rogers, explaining or thanking me for my letter and congratulating me on the graduation. And I'll never forget the bottom line. He ended the letter with, and always remember you're special just because you're you. And to this day, I have that letter hanging in my office at work, and it's quite a conversation starter.
The day I met Mr. Rogers was a day I will never forget. I was working in the design center at WQED, which is the station where Fred Rogers filmed his program. He was on the Arsenio Hall show. So I was watching it. Oh, hey, there he is, and I drew a caricature of Fred, one of the puppets, and Arsenio. And I had it on a nice Bristol board. And I remember tiptoeing into his office, and actually nobody seeing me, and I set it down on his couch. He didn't have a desk in his office, he just had a couch. perfect for Mr. Rogers. And I remember going back to the design studio. Sure enough, here I'm walking out at the end of the day, and there's Fred, but you wouldn't know it was Fred because he wore a bow tie and he had glasses a lot, and he wore a trench coat, and he just looked like a little old man. And I see him in the hallway, and he's looking at something up on the wall in the entrance to Family Communications, which was the Fred Rogers company at the time. And I remember there was a water fountain right behind him. And I remember walking up to the water fountain and looking to see what he was looking at. He had taken that picture that I set on his couch, and he had it hanging up already on the wall in this entranceway. And he was saying something like, "I wish I could meet the artist who drew this. I wish I had time to." And then I said, "This is it." So I turned around, wiped my mouth from the water fountain, and I go, "Look no further. I'm the guy," And we just hit it off instantly right from there. And it was such a hoot. He actually drove me home that day because I was at the time taking the bus because I was a starving artist at art school. He drove me home. We just had a very much grandfather-grandson type of relationship right there.
When I was younger, I spent 2.5 years having nonstop seizures. And the only way my mom and dad could get ready for work in the morning was to plop me down in front of the TV screen with thousands of pillows surrounding me and put on Mr. Rogers. And something about his voice allowed my body to relax. And I was in a trance or something, and I would not have a single episode the entire time he was on the television.
When we decided to have surgery for Beth, which was just a horrendous decision that we had to make, and she had been in and out of countless hospitals, countless blood works and examinations. It took so long to get a diagnosis and then a possible cure, which was to remove the entire left hemisphere of her brain.
A couple weeks before I went into surgery, my mom wrote Mr. Rogers a letter, or rather called his studio asking if he would write me a letter saying he was thinking of me. And he called me that night, and I talked to him for over an hour. I got to talk to all of his puppets. I told him my fears of the operation. I told him stuff that I did not even tell my own mom and dad. And then I went in for surgery, and I had complications. I ended up in a coma for 6 weeks.
My wife got on the phone and told him that Beth's not doing well, she's in a coma, and he said, "I'm gonna come and see her." And even though Kathy said, "But she won't even know you're here, Mr. Rogers," he said, "That's okay."
The only thing he brought with him was a clarinet case of all my friends, all of the puppets, like Daniel Striped Tiger.
Made us take pictures, put the puppets out on Beth's bed, talk to her.
He spent an hour by my bedside in the hospital. He insisted on no press or media. He just wanted it to be a private show between me and him.
As Mr. Rogers was leaving the hospital, somebody asked him, "Fred, of all the people who ask you to come and see them or speak to them or help them, why this one?" And Mr. Rogers said, "This was not a request." He simply said, "It's just something I felt I had to do."
It was, to this day, I can't believe that has happened.
When Sam was graduating from high school, I was thinking about what might be a really fun and unique gift for him. And I thought it would be neat to bookend Sam's school days with a Mr. Rogers experience, because he started his school days watching Mr. Rogers. And she said, "Well, hang on just a moment." She put me on hold. And she came back and she said, "Do you think your son would like to come to the show, to the studio here, and play the drums on the Mr. Rogers show?" And I said, "Yes, I do think he would." And as soon as we walked into the studio, Fred came over and welcomed us. There were some other people there visiting as well, and I'm sure they were all just as excited as we were. And he shook my hand, And then he turned to Sam and welcomed him and then put his arm around Sam and said, "Sam, come over here. Let me show you what I'm planning for the show today. I'm wondering if you have any ideas about it." So it was such a beautiful experience for Sam to be included. When we got home from Pittsburgh, on the porch was a big cardboard box to Sam from Fred Rogers, and we opened it up, and it was this beautiful African-made hand drum that was on the set that Sam was seated in front of when the show happened.
So the sweetest thing happened in my practice a couple of weeks ago. A parent of a child that I've been working with came in, and somehow Fred Rogers came up in conversation, and she shared with me that when she was 3 years old, she would wake up and she would walk into her living room, and when Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, was on, she would simply go to the television and kiss the screen.
So Elena, one of her special things that we did for her 10th birthday was that we had a Mr. Rogers party because Elena turned 10 on the 10th. It was her golden birthday. And I made these Mr. Rogers sing-along books, and my husband, her father, put together video clips, and all of her friends and family and people that love her, they came to our house and we sang songs, right? There are ways to say I love you.
When I was in Pittsburgh in the late 90s, and I found myself driving down Fifth Avenue accompanied by my wife, headed to visit my relative. We came to an area on Fifth Avenue where there was a couple of people walking down a pathway getting ready to cross the street, and it dawned on me as I approached that they were not paying attention and didn't see me coming. And sure enough, they stepped out from behind a line of parked cars, and I had already started to hit the brakes on my car, and I came to a stop probably 5 to 10 feet away. The lady grabbed the man by the arm and pulled him back. He spun and looked at me through the windshield, and my wife gasped. She went, "Donald, you almost ran into Mr. Rogers."
Hey, it's Jim Brickman wishing Mr. Rogers a very happy birthday. You know, if there was one thing that Mr. Rogers really conveyed to kids was that everyone was special. No matter what you look like, what you sounded like, where you were from. And when it comes to birthday parties, there's nothing more special than your birthday, the one day of the year that you are the focus of attention and really special, and everybody appreciates who you are and what you've done. So a very special happy birthday to you, Mr. Rogers, for all you brought to us. It's a beautiful day.
Hi, I'm Marilyn McCoo.
And I'm Billy Davis, Jr.
And although we were grown when Mr. Rogers became so popular for the children, it took no time for us to start realizing what an impact he was having on our youth.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
We love you.
One of the things I like about Fred Rogers is that he liked us just the way we are, and he wanted us to like ourselves, which, luckily for me, comes naturally. Mr. Rogers said each of us is special, and since he is so special to us, we thought we'd ask, what do you like most about Fred? And here's what folks had to say.
Oh, he's very, very calm. I actually thinking of him brings a smile to my face.
He was unique, absolutely unique in television in refusing to allow any advertising to very young children. He thought it was immoral. He thought if children can't tell the difference between the program and the ad. So he thought it was immoral to show ads to them, either on the program or in selling any of the products.
I admire his character simply because he was all loving. You know, he didn't have an enemy. He never met anybody that he didn't want to get to know more. He never met anybody he didn't want to know better than just casually. So I really admire that, the fact that he didn't look at anyone differently from anyone else. Everybody was his neighbor, so to speak.
Mr. Rogers made me feel like I was worth loving.
Especially a person like myself who's grown up with a disability like cerebral palsy. he really, really cared about people in that nature.
I think he had a quiet strength, and his voice could just speak volumes in such little bits. It really was a treasure that he's part of my childhood forever.
Hi, neighbor. My grandmother had a big part in raising me, so I grew up on very traditional music, very traditional programming. Mr. Rogers was a safe place in our home, so I was always able to watch his show with my granny.
Hi, neighbor. The Monkees, our demographic was older, 10 to 12, 14-year-old. Mr. Rogers, of course, played to 4, 6, 8 years old, and I watched the show with my child, Amy, and he made little kids feel safe and happy and warm and fuzzy and cozy, like a teddy bear or something like that.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, Mr. Rogers.
So here's a question. What do Gershwin, Rogers and Hammerstein, Lennon and McCartney have in common with Fred Rogers? Well, obviously they all wore sweaters. I'm kidding. They are all great songwriters. But did you know that Fred wrote all the songs for his show? Over 200 of them. Music was very important to Fred, and along with the genius of his arranger and pianist Johnny Costa, they made beautiful music together.
The first thing I remember is seeing Fred Rogers in a green sweater, putting on his shoes and singing. And he had this really authentic, soothing voice.
He really wasn't concerned with his level of talent or if he was always on pitch, or it wasn't really a performance to me. It was more of a facilitation of an experience.
As an adult, I recognize the depth of his lyrics, that these are so much more than simple little jingles that were written for a kid's show, that these are messages and lines and thoughts that can be applied to adult life. It can be applied to our everyday lives as much as a child's everyday life. Lessons in patience, lessons in kindness and self-value and peace. These are not typical nursery rhyme type songs. That these are very deep lyrics.
So many of his songs were written as though they were being spoken to you. They were very conversational. He was conversational in his lyric because he was talking to you. He was doing it with a melody, but he was also making sure that you understood what he said, and that there was purpose in the words that he wrote.
I like the theme song. I think it's a pretty cliche thing to say, but it's probably my favorite. Yeah, I like how it starts kind of simple in the beginning. I think Johnny Costa got it from a Beethoven sonata, and so it starts kind of, da-da-da-da-da-da, very simple in the beginning, and then it kind of goes crazy from there. And so I really like it.
Well, I like a lot of his music, and I sing a lot of his music to my kids and my grandkids.
I always love to hear him sing, it's such a good feeling.
It's such a good feeling to know you're alive. It's such a happy feeling. You're growing inside.
Won't you be my neighbor?
He had a little sort of pump organ that he played music on as a little boy, and his sister said that he had a photographic memory for music. He could hear a tune one time and sit down and play it on this little pump organ. And when he became more serious about music, he went to his grandmother. Both his grandparents were wonderful to him. And he asked his grandmother, could he have a real piano? And she said, thinking, he's 8, 9 years old, can't be that expensive. Okay, Fred, we'll get you a real piano. And she gave him a trolley ticket to come downtown in Pittsburgh and go to the Steinway store. And he spent 3 hours there playing every piano, and he picked out a Steinway concert grand that would probably cost $60,000 today. This is back in the 1930s. And then he rode the trolley back and told his grandmother and told her what it was going to cost. And she was stunned. But she made an interesting decision. She was a woman who had wealth, had some money, and she thought to herself, music is so important to him. It's going to always be important to him. So she put out the money to buy this Steinway Concert Grand, hugely expensive piano, when he was only, I think, 10 years old. He kept it with him for the rest of his life. He took it to New York. He took it to Toronto. He took it to WQED, the educational station here. He composed 200 songs on that piano. He composed 12 operas on that piano. That piano was as important a thing as there ever was in Fred Rogers' life. And wasn't it wonderful that his grandmother went ahead and spent the money to get it for him?
I especially like one called When the Day Turns into Night, which was written in 1984 at the opera called The Granddad for Daniel.
Yes, yes, Fred Rogers' music deserves to be in the Great American Songbook.
Hi, neighbor. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood carved out a piece of American culture that was extremely important, not just in the 60s or 70s, but even today. I mean, we need to reflect on those things.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sandi Patty. I had the amazing privilege of being a part of a project a year ago that celebrated the music of our beloved Mr. Rogers. An incredible human, an incredible musician, an incredible communicator. Happy birthday. Because it's you I like. Happy birthday, Mr. Rogers.
Hi, neighbor. Anybody that came from a broken home, they would watch Mr. Rogers and just wish that that was their dad because of just how nurturing and kind he was. Probably kindergarten, I remember just listening to him speak. It was so smooth and soft and gentle, instantly just peace. He is well missed and left an incredible legacy.
Well, hello, neighbors. It really is a beautiful day in the neighborhood. And especially today, because today is Mr. Rogers' birthday. Believe it or not, Fred Rogers and I had quite a few things in common with one another. He believed in treating people with love, kindness, understanding, and respect. So do I. He also believed in the power of education and reading books. And so do I. And that's the honest truth. Happy birthday, Mr. Rogers.
One of my favorite parts of Mr. Rogers' show is when he put on his sweater. Just got this one back from the cleaners. What's your favorite part of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood?
He would explain how things work. He would explain how crayons were made, or...
I think as a kid, you know, I just enjoyed where he would take us that day and what we would learn about. And then, of course, I was always, you know, anticipating the trolley when trolley came, and off we went to the land of make-believe, and just the magic of that was very special as a child.
He turns the camera and we see the musicians, we see the pianist, the drummer, and the bassist, and he allowed each instrumentalist to play their part of the theme song and then play it together and show how that works, how it comes together, and how it plays into the show.
The trolley going around?
Yeah.
Is that what you like? Remember with the trolley going around?
Yeah.
For me, it's how he met some of the big issues of the day head on and was able to talk to kids, talk to adults all at the same time.
It was one day I sat down and I diagrammed or documented what color sweater Mr. Rogers wore on every episode from 1979 through 2001, because I felt like everything on that show was so intentional and so calculated that there had to have been some sort of pattern or rhyme or reason to to why he wore certain colors and certain orders, and of course there wasn't, but it made for a nice little chart.
My principal came to us and said, "What do you think about showing Mr. Rogers?" Which I thought was a crazy idea. I'm like, these kids are not going to sit still for that, you know, and it did take a couple episodes, but children thrive on structure and routine. So they know when I put my Mr. Rogers shirt on every Friday, it's a Mr. Rogers Friday, and we're going to have a great day.
Hi, I'm Paul Cowsill.
Hi, I'm Susan Cowsill.
And I'm Bob Cowsill, and we're the Cowsills.
And our family life, which was a bit harsh, Mr. Rogers brought in a balance to our own home. With that soft voice and that sweater, and his whole attitude was like, it really was pleasing to us.
Here's this nice little man with this lovely sweater and sneakers and puppets that I adore telling me, I'm okay to be me.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. Rogers. Woo!
Hi, this is Jon Secada, and the memory of Mr. Rogers lives on. It was an honor being part of such a wonderful record celebrating your music, the music of such an icon. Wish you could be there for the celebration of such a wonderful day, but in heart and spirit, I am there, always will be there, and thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to be a part of your world. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Mr. Rogers. Thank you for being you.
We've been sharing stories about Fred and could talk about him for hours, but I can't help but wonder, what would you say to Fred today, if you could?
If I ever saw Mr. Rogers again, I would definitely say thank you for being my neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
感激你, Mr. Rogers.
We love you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you for responding to my letter, and thank you for my childhood.
I would say thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Fred, for everything you did for us.
We love you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you for being you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. Rogers. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. Rogers.
Thanks to all of you for helping us celebrate the music and memories of Mr. Rogers. Fred once said, "If you could only sense how important you are to the lives of those you meet, how important you can be to the people you may never even dream of, there is something of yourself that you leave at every meeting with another person." We can't even begin to thank Fred for all that he has left for us. So on that note, I'm Tom Bergeron. I've enjoyed being with you, and on behalf of all his friends and fans, I'd like to say thank you, Mr. Rogers. Thank you for being you.
Thank you for caring and helping us grow, sharing ideas that we needed to know. But more important for all that you do, thank you for being you.
Thank you for helping us stand on our own. Thank you for bringing the world to our home. Music and stories that we never knew. Thank you for being you. Words could never measure. A gift would be too small. But more than any treasure, we love you most of all. Yes, we do.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Gracias, Mr. Rogers.
We love you.